Well, welcome in, LSU fans. This is your place to cry. This is your place to pout, your place to rant, to rave. My name is Bryce Koon alongside Glen West here on the Go 24/7 podcast, where LSU, and there's so many different words that you could put together what LSU did on the field on Saturday. Just an absolutely, I think, abysmal performance. 27-16, they lose this game to Florida. I do want to start this off, Glenn, because I know it's very easy to kind of get lost into the team that we cover and the team that we see each and every single day. DJ Lagway's a special player, and you have to give credit. Even though Florida is not necessarily a great team, those players are believing in Billy Napier, and they haven't given up on him. It was very easy for Florida players to give up, and they haven't. So credit, hats off to Florida. Great environment down here in Gainesville. But let's talk LSU here, Glenn, where you obviously, and I like when we do this, when one of us is at the game, the other one's watching TV, because it kind of gives two different vantage points of being able to see some things. We can start big picture here, Glenn. Just abysmal. I mean, I think you can talk. I mean, offensively here, it has just been a mess ever since the Arkansas game. A lot of people have said since that second half of A&M, but I even told you before. I kind of think that LSU should have had more than 17 points in that first half in College Station. So let's start it with offense, man. I mean, just your thoughts on what you saw. Obviously, you saw the TV copy, so maybe just some of your thoughts to kind of open things up here.
Yeah, I mean, look, what if I had told you going into this game that LSU would outgain Florida? They would, by like 50 or 60 yards, they would have complete control of time of possession. They'd win the time of possession 41-18. And Nussmeier didn't throw an interception. How many points do you think LSU would have scored in that situation? Like
At least 30.
Yeah. I am just dumbfounded by how hard it is for this offense to score points when it gets 30 yards and in. It's not even just in the red zone. I mean, like when they get into the 30-yard line, it's either a bad penalty or a turnover or a negative play. I mean, like they just cannot score the football right now. They cannot punch it in for touchdowns. And outside of that, one touchdown they had against Alabama in garbage time of that game, they scored two touchdowns in the last 10 quarters. I mean, it's insane how much of a cliff this thing has fallen off of offensively, and everyone is to blame. It's everyone. It's Joe Sloan. It's Garrett Nussmeier. It's the offensive line. It's the wide receivers who just cannot seem to create separation. The one person I would say it's maybe not at fault is Mason Taylor. I think he is playing very well. I think he's doing everything that he can in his power. Whenever Nussmeier looks his way, it's typically for a big play. It's typically for a first down or a big time conversion, something like that. He should be touching the ball 15, 16 times a game. I mean, not 5 or 6. I mean, he is the only one making plays right now in this offense. Aaron Anderson had a nice game too, but he disappeared in the Alabama game. So like, there's just so much wrong with this team right now. I mean, especially offensively. I mean, they even went 13 of 24 on third downs. But you know what? They also were their average down to distance on third down was 8.5 yards or 8.8, 8.9 yards. I mean, they just were constantly behind the chains, and it's a miracle they had 13 conversions when it's like, oh, you're at 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10, 3rd and 11. It's just constantly this team has just not found ways to be able to convert when they need to put pressure on the opposition here in the last 3 or 4 games, and it's completely flipped this season around. I mean, this time a month ago, we were talking, so much about just, okay, we've reached a certain level here. Can they take it to that next step? They've gone like 4 or 5 steps down. I mean, like they have not played good football at all on the offensive side of the ball, and it's a big time concern. And I think when you just see it and you look at kind of the players on the field, they're just getting busted up front. I mean, their offensive line, I know they're down Garrett Dellinger. That is not the reason they're playing this bad. Dellinger Dellinger out is certainly a loss and certainly a blow. And this was not a great game for Paul Mubanga, the second-year offensive lineman. He had a real tough time in the middle, especially with James coming through the middle. I mean, he was a man on a mission tonight, and they got at Nussmeier. But 7 sacks. Mm-hmm. They had given up 4 sacks all season. They nearly doubled the sacks in one game. It's crazy. It's crazy how much this thing has kind of fallen off of a cliff, and they ran the ball well too. Like 91 yards for
Yeah.
Caden Durham on 20 carries. That's what we wanted to see. 69 yards for Josh Williams on 10, 11 carries. That's what we wanted to see. I mean, like, they did some things well in this game, but man, when you move the ball up and down the field and you're constantly settling for 50-yard field goals, or getting behind,
and you can't snap it properly, by the way, either.
Yeah. I mean, that was a really great job by Peyton Todd to get a hold of that one snap. I mean, that one was really off. I mean, they're in a complete downturn right now, and I had mentioned it here in the lead up to this week. I wouldn't be surprised if LSU had another game where they lost just because of how bad things have been. I might have even downplayed that. I mean, what are we looking at here over the next two games? I mean, Vanderbilt's an offense that's been pretty explosive at times, and beat Alabama. I mean, Oklahoma is a team that hasn't really shown you very much, but I mean, what has this LSU team shown you? I don't know that there's a team right now in the SEC that's playing worse football than LSU right now. And that is just such a drastic turn from where we were a month ago. And it starts at the top, man. It starts at the top with Brian Kelly. He's going to take a lot of heat for this, and deservedly so. It was just a really, really poor performance again. When you needed to start to show some fight, show some confidence on the road in your final matchup away from Baton Rouge, and they came out and they laid another dud. So that's kind of my rant there. I don't know what you have to say about the offense, but it was abysmal for most of that game, and don't know if there's a clear answer on how they kind of get this fixed over the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, and it's something I'm going to go more into, Glenn, honestly, on a column that I'm going to start writing right after we get done with this that we'll kind of release on Monday, but it maybe even Sunday afternoon. But, when you look at this offense, and we'll get to the defense in a second, like the excuse for the defense is, and I'll just say, like, you just don't have the Jimmies and Joes. Like,
they
you
held
just
on
don't
as long
have
as they could. They held on as long as they could. They had them like at 13 points well into the third quarter. The offense just gave them no shot to win this game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's my thing. Like, defensively, you need better players. Glenn, offensively, you got guys, and they're just not executing. And I know people are getting frustrated, and we're going to get comments in the YouTube on this right now. I know they're going to get frustrated with Brian Kelly's maybe lack of urgency, the way he carries himself in press conferences. And I would say this too, in big emotional wins, he carries himself the same way as he does in emotional losses. So if he keeps it the same way no matter what. But I will say this. He can only continue to deflect the getting players into the right position to have success and the players executing. Folks, at the bottom line, they're just not executing. They're just not playing well. I mean, there's no magic potion. There's no magic there's no magic bean coming out of a bag that's going to change this. This team is who they are. I think it's very frustrating, Glenn. We talked about this in the preview podcast, the fact that they ran the ball effectively. Florida's one of the worst rush defenses in the SEC. LSU comes in, they establish the run. Literally, Brian Kelly was asked, I think Jacques Doucet asked him, have you ever been a part of a game where you dominated so many statistical categories except for the touchdown factor? He said no. And for the first time, you can kind of see, like, he doesn't have the answer. And this is a guy who's head coach for 30-plus years at different stops, Division II, FCA, like everything. And you can see he doesn't have the answers. And I think it's just a telling sign of they don't you just got to get the season over with and get back to the drawing board.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I was listening to the press conference a little bit while you were getting back to your hotel. And the one answer that I think really stood out to me from that whole thing was that he's getting more involved with the offense. He's getting
had the
play card. I mean, he had the play sheet there. And when you're still having these problems, when the head coach is like looking over your shoulder every single time and trying to find out ways. I mean, his answer there, I don't remember who asked. I think it might have been Wilson. I was listening in on it, but it might have been Wilson. He asked him just kind of what his involvement was with the play sheet. And he said, well, it's not really a reflection on how I feel about my staff and them being able to do the job. It's just more for me trying to figure out how I can help these players try to be the best versions of themselves. Yeah. And if we're here sitting and talking about that in week 12, week 13 of the season, it's just a massive oversight of just kind of how bad it's gone over the last month or so of this season. I mean, you're absolutely right. They have got to get to the off season. They have got to get this signing class signed up They cannot. I mean, we already got it up on our board, but Devin Harper has already fled to Ole Miss. There could be more, with other flip commits out there that are certainly on the board, being pursued by other teams. And when you look out there and you look at just kind of the reaction from the players, I mean, multiple times you probably didn't see this on the TV broadcast. Kyron Lacey went over to Brian Kelly after one of those sacks on third down, and he was in Brian Kelly's face. He was yelling at Brian Kelly, very much in his face. I don't know what was said. I don't know what the conversation was there, but he was a very frustrated player. You had obviously the thing that went viral there in the first half. I'm sure a lot of the media folks picked up on it when he was getting into Chris Hilton, and I mean, you're playing a real dangerous game here if you're Brian Kelly, and I think the one quote that stood out to me was on Thursday when he was asked about the preparation for Florida, and I'll pull it up here because I do think it's important. And look, he had some, I guess I want to call it word salad after that about wanting to prepare better and how we're getting our guys ready for the game and things like that. But the very first thing he said when asked about the preparation was, "Look, nobody's in a good mood. The food doesn't taste good. Nobody's happy being around each other." And I thought that last part there, when he said nobody's happy being around each other, I thought that was maybe a bridge too far of like an answer that you had to get that to make public. I mean, like that's just something that tells me, man, they're teetering right now. Like this is not. And I don't want to say that they're losing the locker room or anything like that, but when you have your head coach going out there and making those kinds of comments before the game, it certainly speaks to a level of, I guess, disconnect that they're having right now. And you can see it in the way that they're executing on the field. You guys spoke with Emory Jones and a couple of different players after the game, and maybe you can talk a little bit about that. But they have got to get this thing corrected. They've got to get a lot of changes this offseason in here. I don't know what that means, in terms of what kind of coaching changes are made. I don't even want to speculate about that. That's probably not something we do until the end of the year. But this is just a real wake up moment, I think, for this program. And they can either continue to go downhill from here, or they can continue to work and try to find and climb their way back to finding some kind of confidence, some kind of momentum here over the next 2 weeks. I don't see it. I don't know how much you can realistically expect, wins over Vanderbilt and Oklahoma to end the season in terms of just your confidence level about this team going into the offseason. But they've got to figure out something, man, because these last 3 efforts are just brutal. I mean, they're just brutal for everything you're trying to build if you're Brian Kelly.
Well, and it says a lot about, just the foundation, I think, in terms of, and that's why I call this loss. I mean, this is an organizational failure. In terms of what you mentioned, Glenn, everyone's to blame. You can't really point fingers because you'd be pointing them at everybody. I mean, it's a complete meltdown. And I don't want to rehash things, but Mason Taylor, somebody's going to make that kid a Pro Bowl tight end, and we're going to look back and think, what if? Like, what if they'd utilized him better? But that's a whole
fantastic player. He's a fantastic player. He should have more than 5 catches for 69 yards. And it was something that I asked BK about a couple of weeks ago when he was kind of on that stretch of like 3 catches. I can't remember which games it were. And BK was like, what are you talking about? He's a huge part of our offense, And I'm like, well, recently he hasn't been, and
the numbers don't back that up.
Yeah, and so I don't know. It was. Look, I know we got to talk about the defense here, and I don't want to put too much of this on the defense. They had the busted play on the 55-yard touchdown where apparently Whitweek said half the defense thought they were running one play and the other half thought they were running another. There's another example of the disconnect we were just talking about. Like it's bad vibes right now in Baton Rouge. It is bad vibes, and they've got to do whatever they can to kind of salvage what's left of this season, which, in my opinion, nothing short of 2 wins here would be adequate. I mean, like, they have got to get these next 2 wins if they want to have any kind of feel-good moments about themselves going into the offseason.
Yeah, I kind of end the conversation on the offense here. A lot of frustrations. They've got to figure it out. Tons of things. And I'm not talking about figuring out the next 2 games. I don't think you figure anything out. No. I think you just hope that you can put up enough points to beat these next 2 teams. And, I mean, honest to God, and avoid going 6-6. I mean, that's a real possibility.
It's on the table. Yeah.
It's on the table. Yeah. I said this after the Alabama game, Glenn. I don't know how anyone could look at me with a straight face and say they can predict what will happen because we have no clue what version of LSU will show up. There's so many different versions week in, week out. It's crazy. All right, let's talk defense here. And I like what you said. I'll start it off here because, look, man, I mentioned it. Like, people can keep complaining about the staff and whatever you want to. They don't have the personnel. I mean, I've used this analogy so many times. They are wringing out as much as they can out of the kids they have. I'll give a great example. Ashton Stamps. I think Ashton Stamps has honestly been, solid to the point of what you could have expected when you look at his recruiting profile. We're a recruiting network. We obviously, we have a lot of people who put a lot of stock into that. Kid was a 3-star recruit. I don't know what else. When there's a reason these kids are rated the way they are, and it's not saying the Stamps cannot in the future outperform that, but you're seeing this is what happens when Brian Kelly obviously misfired on the initial hires, and so now you're paying the price. I still like the defensive staff they had, but Glenn, I mean, I'm going to be a little harsh here. Like, there's a reason that you don't see a lot of Division II transfer defensive linemen playing big minutes, at the defensive tackle position. There's a reason why it's not necessarily the best case all the time to move a defensive end and parachute to the inside. It's been a great talking point when he's played well, but when things are going bad, that's the reasons that you should never have to be in at a place like LSU. So, I mean, we can talk personnel-wise. We beat that to a dead horse, I feel like, at this point. Glenn, explosive plays, like, okay, that was a problem in this game, but overall, like, I don't know what people want this defense to do. They are who they are. The personnel's not SEC elite level. To me, it's bottom tier of the SEC. We shouldn't be in a conversation about this defense having to nearly pitch shutouts to go win football games. And that's honestly, at this point in the season, where we're at.
Look, I like what Zy Alexander did today. I thought he had a nice game. I thought, Savion Jones had a couple QB pressures. I mean, coming into this game, we knew that if Lagley was going to play, his mobility was going to be kaputs. Like, he was not going to be able to move the ball or move around in the pocket very well. But the one thing we said was he's going to be able to beat you with his arm if you're not careful, because he's got a cannon of an arm, and in the limited time he has been on the field, he has been able to hit some explosive plays, and he hit one on, I believe it was PJ Woodland that was in coverage. He hit a couple on Stamps when he was in coverage. And I hate to call these guys out because they're young players and they're first and second year guys, but you're on the field and you got to try to do your best to make those plays. But man, like, Devon Keys was out there. I mean, I thought the turning point in this game, quite honestly, was when that interception went right in Devon Keys' hand. You had an opportunity there to turn the field on him, turn momentum, get a good pick off of DJ Lagway, have a short field for this offense, and see if they couldn't go on and score some points. Now, given the way that this game played out, there's no guarantee at all that the offense would have gotten any points out of that. If they had picked it off at the 35-yard line of Florida, who's to say the offense doesn't go backwards because of a couple stupid penalties? Because, I mean, they had those tonight on top of everything else. Will Campbell and Emory Jones getting called for false starts. I mean, it's just I'm all right. I'm going to leave the offense stuff in the past. Defensively, though, kind of getting back on track, that was a big turning point. Sage Ryan had an interception right in his hands that he dropped. That was a little bit of a tougher play to make, but it's one that you'd like to see a safety be able to come up and make. Look, they didn't do a terrible job, I don't think. I mean, outside of the 55-yard run from Bell, I thought they did a decent job of limiting them on the ground, but they only ran, what I'm looking at, 26 plus 17. They ran like 43 plays. They didn't hardly run any plays. LSU ran 92 plays in this game. They more than doubled them up in plays. Like, I mean, they had the ball so much of this game, and it's just every time, I mean, and they forced, several punts. I mean, I'm looking at it here. I think it was 3 or 4 punts. Yeah, they forced 4 punts, but outside of the 4 punts, Florida did score on every other drive outside of like the halftime, going into the half and the end of game. So you had 4 punts, but you also had 5 scoring drives that you allowed. So in that respect, it was not great. But to me, defensively, I think you're right at the end of the day. I think they had believed they spent a ton of money on this coaching staff, on this defensive staff. And I think they just need the time to get the right guys in here. We talked about coming in, how they didn't change a whole lot in terms of personnel defensively and how that might, affect this team. And that certainly was the case in this game. And they have to get some new fresh blood in here. And get them coached up, get them developed, and see if they can't get this thing back on the right track. But to me, at the end of the day, this comes back to the offense, man, and just another dreadful performance from those guys, and it's just not looking like it's going to get any better anytime soon.
Well, and I wanted to add this too, just for clarification on Devon Keys, and I confirmed this with Whit Weeks post game. We talked a little bit. The one positive thing he said, he said that was a hard role for Devon Keys to come into. He said obviously we didn't have our full slate of guys. He said we did move down to a 4-3 defense, which we haven't seen at times. We expected LSU to maybe do that at times. So you had 3 true linebackers, and I still think Keys could be a special player. But like you said. That hurts right there. I mean, it hurts. And I'm not going to say LSU lost the game because of Devon Keys. No, that's furthest thing from the truth.
No, and I hope I didn't make it come across that way.
No,
I just
not at
said
all.
that was a very big turning point in that game. Yeah,
it's a big turning point, but that single play. I mean, I think what we have said here, Glenn, is that there's plays that you can look at, but they didn't define the whole game. It's the collection of bad plays that ended up defining the whole game for LSU. And I think that shows you that the room for error, the margin of error, is razor thin. I mean, it is. LSU can't make mistakes and win football games. And I've said this, coming into this game, I didn't think this was a team that could roll the ball out there and just say, yep, we've got better, star ratings. We can beat you. You can't. And they can't do that against anybody. I mean, it's probably even more telling, and maybe I'm overreacting to the fact that they beat Nichols. I mean, you have to execute. This team's just not talented enough to just go out there and roll the ball out. They don't execute at a high level enough.
All right, so look, the first 5 or 6 weeks, what was the common theme that we were talking about? They're playing with fire. They're in a lot of these tight games, and at some point, we think this thing could come up and hurt you in the wrong way. And man, has that happened? I mean, like they not only are they not in these tight games, they are just getting worked over in these games, and it's not even close. And so it's a team very low on confidence right now. You can tell by the way they're playing. I thought offensively they were very passive early on. It looked like a group that was trying not to make mistakes in the first half, which I think that bled over into the second half with some of the mistakes they did make, was that they were just overthinking and they were drop passes. There were guys not getting open. There was obviously Nussmeier with the fumble there, and Emory Jones picking it up and running it and fumbling it again. Like, I mean, there's just so many things that just go wrong in a snap of a finger for this team, when you think that maybe they're in position to win a game or get kind of back into a game or make a good go ahead score or something like that. They just continue to shoot themselves in the foot, and that's very alarming that we're still sitting here and talking about that, and with only 2 games left to go.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, everyone wants to know, where do you go from here? A lot of introspection. Yeah. I don't think that we can really, go in depth that and keep this under the 30-minute time limit, to be honest with you, that we kind of imposed.
I think we touched on it a little bit. I mean, you got to get this signing class as intact as possible. Maybe try to pull off a couple flips late, and then you got to get to work on development. You got to hit on some portal guys. You got to get wide receiver 1 out of the portal. I think you got to get a couple interior linemen. You got to get a couple safeties. You got to get a linebacker. You got to get some defensive line. You got to get a lot of stuff. And LSU, we saw last year, if they wait till spring, what can happen when those prices go up and those positions of need become more apparent after going through spring ball. Like, you better get a lot of your work done here over the next couple of weeks in the winter session. So we'll see what happens.
So it happens. LSU devastating 27-16 loss. Like I said, I do want to give a shout out to Florida. I mean, they brought the energy. They played with that fire that you talked about.
You could hear it through the TV, man. They were loud in there. I bet that was a pretty loud atmosphere, was it not?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was very loud. And I think, one of the big takeaways I had from it was, and I'll leave it with this, and Glenn, I'll put this on my shoulder so you don't have to go on freezing cold takes or anything. But I was kind of talking with some people about this. I said, it'll be very interesting in 2 years, okay, if we look back and Billy Napier has Florida on the rise and Brian Kelly has LSU mired somewhere, or Brian Kelly's not the head coach at LSU. We point back to, you lost Alabama, you lost A&M. But that that game in November out in Gainesville back in 2024, that was a launching pad for one team and the beginning of a free fall for another. I'm not suggesting it might be, but I think when we all go look at coaching changes and different trajectories, there's always one or two games you can go look at when those two teams meet. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that rolls out, and a lot of work for LSU. We'll have great coverage over for you. But hey, big win for the basketball team out in Manhattan in the Little Apple. Cam Carter, that was a lot of fun to watch, Glen
It's
West.
it's the little things in life. The little things in life you got to look forward to.
Let's
Basketball is
go,
looking
baby.
great.
Baseball 90 days away.
Caught a little bit of the fall scrimmage today before the game. Derek Curiel, remember the name, freshman outfielder. He's going to be he's got next in line. I think he's going to be one of the next great hitters. I don't think he's going to be. He might turn into a power guy, but he'll be a high contact guy and somebody that I think LSU fans will enjoy watching for years to come. So lots to be excited about still between basketball, between recruiting, between baseball. We know a lot of our guys on our board love baseball, and so we'll have all that coverage wall to wall for you guys going forward. But no doubt, disappointing end to what's been a kind of a free fall season here for LSU. So we'll hopefully get a little bit better, cleaner performances over the next couple of weeks. But if not, you guys know where to find us. So we'll keep the board active for all of you guys.
Make sure to subscribe to the podcast. Come over and get your Go 24/7 subscription under 3 weeks away from early signing day. That's a bright spot for any team that's scuffling in the month of November. But that's Glen West. My name is Bryce Koon. We appreciate you tuning into this instant reaction podcast, and we'll have more for you throughout the week. And so make sure you head over to the YouTube channel, all those podcast feeds as well. We will catch you next time here on the Go 24/7 podcast.